Hey, Joanne. Are you in?
I am in.
How are
I'm
you?
good. How are
Yeah, this
you?
this was so easy. Why don't we do this all the time?
We spent almost an hour yesterday trying to figure out how to use Facebook.
Yeah, well, it was definitely their problem and not ours. But while we're at it, feels like some stuff's been happening lately. What are you thinking about this Tim Walz guy?
Yeah, sure seems like some people have some opinions about this Tim Walz guy. Um, uh, we continue to be living through a period when the dynamics of what's going on now and the reality of what's going on now are off the charts.
So what's your take on this? I mean, really, if you think about it, it's been since June 27th that the entire political world has been completely upended. And where are you with this all now? Aha, you've frozen. Um, are you? Yeah, for once, it doesn't appear to be me. This is exciting. We should make note of this. Joanne, you there? So one of the things, if we'll see if she comes back, one of the things that jumps out to me is how completely unprepared it seems that the Republicans have been in dealing with this entirely new moment. That is what they keep doing, is they keep falling back on what they've done in the past, and it's simply not working against what is really seemingly a very new moment in the Democratic Party. So we have obviously Kamala Harris, the vice president, who has tapped into, I think, the base of the Democratic Party really since the 1960s, primarily women and people of color, Black women. And now we've also got the rise and the injection into that party of the progressive Midwest. And that is a really big change. And one of the things that really jumped out today was the degree to which the Republicans simply keep trying to fall back on the idea that the Democrats are communists. And that is, Joanne is back. And that is really seemingly not. I mean, it looks really, really flat-footed. I think the idea that the hi, Joanne.
I don't know what just happened, but your phone didn't explode. So,
Oh, yeah, point out of the sun. I do think it's interesting. I just basically said that first of all, that this was not me for once that was not here, which was exciting. But also that what interests me about this moment is to the degree to which the MAGA Republicans are falling back on their past, essentially calling their opponents communists and trying to hit on cultural issues at the same time that the Democrats seem to have launched a real new era in their party where they are not only doubling down on the women and people of color, especially Black women who make up the base of the party, but have now really aggressively incorporated Midwestern progressivism.
well, related to that, I think you're right that right now the right, the Trump folk are just throwing old classics. Hey, let's try birth certificates. Darn, that didn't work. And you're right that I think I heard you say before I got thrown into space that they weren't prepared. But what's interesting to me about what we're seeing is that not only are the right were they not prepared for what happened, but really, and this is not a new phenomenon, but there are no policy issues on that side. They run a campaign of fear and anger and hate, and that's what they run on. And all of a sudden, we have a new campaign that's come along that's throwing feelings back, and it's harder, I think, to fight against that, particularly given that I think Americans, in ways that we didn't realize, were traumatized by the pandemic, exhausted by the degrees to which we've really been having to focus on politics and stressed out by the unknowingness of politics for a long time. I think in all kinds of ways, emotionally, not only are they saying we're the joyful warriors, but the American public is grabbing, is hungry for that. So not only is the right not equipped, you can't throw hate and fear against joy and inclusiveness in an effective way. And I don't think they know what else to do at the moment. But Americans are really ripe, open for that message right now. And I think particularly, we never had a moment where we acknowledged the impact of the pandemic on us.
That's a really good point. And people have mentioned that walls looks very much like what fathers and grandfathers looked like before they were poisoned by Fox. Hey, listen, I have a question for you on this front, though. And I've spent the day kind of trying to think of a moment that looks like this, where one of the parties has just completely descended into fear and hatred. And the obvious place to look would have been the Democrats in the 1850s, but they at least had a vision of world domination. And so then I came up with Ignatius Donnelly in the 1890s, as one does, because he felt that the world had been taken over by the rich and it was all going to hell in a handbasket. And he wrote that novel, Caesar's Column, that was in which, basically only 3 people escaped from, the apocalypse. And I couldn't really think of a major political moment when one party had essentially painted itself into a corner. Am I missing something?
I've got one,
yeah.
And you're not going to like it. The election of 1800.
Well, of course, that was a loser of an election. That's freaking.
But what's interesting about that is the dynamics of it echo the present. You have the Federalists who were in power, and we're increasingly aware of the fact that the Jeffersonian Republicans were becoming more popular. And as they became popular, the Federalists began resorting to fear, right? Bury your Bibles. He's a fanatic. People were burying their Bibles, right? The world is going to collapse if Jefferson becomes president.
But they were literally burying their Bibles but unless you bury it below the frost line, it turns to mulch.
You're such a New Englander.
No, true. I mean,
I can't tell you the mechanics of how those Bibles.
Well, you can't just tell me they buried their Bibles and then say you don't know the mechanics.
Maybe it was in a box.
Go oopsie oops. Mulch.
I can't tell you that, but what I can say is the Federalists, they went into fear and panic and lying. And as we got closer to the election of 1800, people were really ramped up for Jefferson because he represented, granted by our standards, a not too democratic view, but by their standards, a more democratic vision of what America could be. And in the end, the Federalists became so convinced that they might not win that they tried to essentially steal the election by trying to claim that it was invalid and they would temporarily take control. And so basically, it's a very, very similar moment in which a party that's used to having power and being entitled to it could see that the mood and the demographics of the nation were going in a different direction. And first they tried to scare people into being with them, and then they tried to mess with the electoral system. And in the end, they lost. Now, Jefferson always liked to play this up. He called it the Revolution of 1800. Ah, yes, the Revolution of 1800 that I was at the center of. But what he was getting at, in part there, is the kind of spirit of that moment. He went through the actual revolution, so he would know what that felt like. But I think that's strikingly similar.
Interesting, because I have a hard time looking at, certainly in that election, the Federalists had policies, and they had policies that they were convinced would save the country, and would really promote the country, and they were not necessarily wrong. I mean, Hamilton knew what he was doing.
No.
But that's different than this, where it just seems to be, as I said the other day, one of the things that frustrates me in this moment is that we really do need at least 2 healthy parties to discuss and debate the many issues we have.
Absolutely.
And when one party is actually talking about policy and trying to advance a set of ideas, and the other one is just throwing poo at the walls, it's very hard to get to a decent place as a country.
Absolutely true. But here's what I'll say that'll connect.
I don't think of Adams as flinging poo at the walls.
They were not flinging poo. There's a sentence I never thought I would say. But That election wasn't about policy. That election was about democracy. That election was about how democratic would the United States be. And that's what it focused on. And in that sense, we are in a moment right now where we're not debating policy. In a sense, what we're debating is how democratic a nation will we be. And when you get down to that level of basics, of like fundamental, the shape of America, I don't know, that's got to create some big feelings and extreme action. And I think, oddly enough, I can't say before this moment that I thought, yeah, this reminds me of the election of 1800, but I think in many ways it's very similar, because what do you do if you see you're losing power? You cheat and threaten people.
All right, so we're almost out of time, so I can't come back with the election of 1868, which I would like to, but I think it feels like one of the reasons this is such a big deal is not just because we're fighting about democracy, but because we're fighting about both the short-term future of this country and the extremely long-term future of this country, but also what the next generation of American politics will look like, what the next 40 years look like. And what has emerged from the Democrats really since Biden and Harris took office, but especially since Biden said he would not accept the nomination for the Democratic presidency in 2024, is a new Democratic Party. And I find this fascinating and really interesting because I've written about the Republican Party now for more than 30 years. And to be able to write about the Democrats now as, as the real force is, extraordinarily welcome to me.
Absolutely. In a sense, a new party, and the generational component of it is vitally important, because you've got younger people, some of whom have never experienced a moment like this, and are experiencing that sort of political dynamic for the first time. But also, I think you're absolutely right that what we're seeing is that the congealing, the transformation of something, something is being created here and something is being created there. I mean, in a way, you and I, as political historians, we study party systems and political parties, and this is the most remarkably fluid moment to be looking at what parties are doing and what their outcome might be.
That's exactly it. I had not articulated it that way, but we are in absolutely a fluid moment, which is something we have both predicted and both expected and both hoped for. And yet to be in it is just, we've never been here before.
No. And I have to say, I know I said some version of this before, but I'm so glad to be doing this with you, Heather, my fellow political historian friend.
I'm with you 100%. I do wish that one of the things that would get accomplished in this moment is better broadband and cell service across the United States of America. Because at least today I'm not at the supermarket. I'm at Floor Magic.
You told me you were in a different location, but I could not quite picture what it was. I mean, honestly, folks, we tried for almost an hour yesterday to do this using Facebook and couldn't do it. So yes, better broadband.
It seems like any party should get behind that. All right, we should let people go because we've been at our 10 minutes. But
okay.
It's always lovely to see you, and we'll see if I can maybe find a place closer to home than Floor Magic that has service.
Okay, that sounds good, Heather. It's so good to see you.
Take care. Love you, Joanne.
Love you too.
Bye.
Bye.
I think bye.
Uh-oh.